Welcome back, members, to the Illuminations Media Network section that's just for you, where you will get contact that you cannot get anywhere else. We are resuming our conversation with Susan Martinez, the author of The Mysterious Origins of Hybrid Man, Crossbreeding, and the Unexpected Family Tree of Humanity. Now, Susan, when we left off on the other side, we had just gotten into the idea about Afrocentric point of view, about white supremacy. You know, we spoke about the fact there are a couple of different camps out there who want to say that everyone sprung up from the so-called white or European group, and some who want to say that everybody sprung out of Africa. So let's dig into those ideas a bit, and let's clear the air.
I don't think it makes too much sense to look for a Garden of Eden. I think we ought to forget about that.
All right.
But with the way I work with this material, the closest that we come to a Garden of Eden is the continent of Pan, because of the diaspora out of that place to the different parts of the world, and the little people bringing their genes to mix with the indigenous people in all the different lands of the world.
And so what you're saying is that Pan was out here in the Pacific, and certainly, due to some war or some catastrophic event, it sank. And so the little people got on boats, and they traveled and panned out through the whole earth. And that's where they began to mix with the other people. So this flood or this destruction clearly didn't affect anywhere else but Pan.
That's right, except for it being such a gigantic destruction. I think there could be a tie-in with the Andes Mountains, which is on the Pacific coast, and with other circum-Pacific areas, but that's something I'm exploring right now in the new book.
So there were people still alive, and the little people began to mix with those people.
Yeah, so, in other words, the flood, we have to forget about the flood as destroying all the people and all the animals on the earth. That's a myth. Right. The flood was actually the sinking of the continent of Pan. And everywhere else in the world, people were alive and well. But there was a huge change there because the Ihens, the little people, came as initiators. And that's why we find similar works in all parts of the world.
Sure, that makes a great deal of sense. So that speaks to that high consciousness stream that we find, where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was animal husbandry. There were different things that were happening that seemed out of sequence.
That's right. All the suddenlies in every place, all the great leap forward. It really wasn't. It was just the arrival of the Ihan race and sharing of their knowledge. Then, but it's not so simple, because they interbred with the local people, and they produced a new race after the flood, and you could probably call them the Cro-Magnon race. They were a large, well-built, white or Caucasoid, Europoid type, but they were not. They were offspring of the sacred little people, but they themselves were not sacred. I think those were the sun kingdoms of the Mesolithic. I think those were kingdoms full of pomp and glory, who learned so many of the useful arts from the teachers and forefathers, the little people, but were too interested in grandiosity to follow the spiritual way of their teachers and forerunners. And I think they were the builders of the monumental work all over the planet.
Very, very fascinating. This is sobering information.
It is, because we tend to look at the pyramids and all the other Cyclopean architecture as a magnificent race, masterful, so blah, blah, blah. But these were the offspring of the little people, but they themselves were not holy. They went to war. They conducted sacrifices in their temples. You know, this is these are not the great people. They were well endowed, but they were already a corruption of the original teachings.
Right. Now, when we look at this, you know, certainly there was this spark of the divine that was put into the people, and certainly the little people were the result of that. And then, of course, degrading continued to happen as they continued to mix. Where did this evil or wickedness come from? Was it already within the man? Where did it show up and come from?
The way human beings are, we are born with the potential to go up the mountain or down the mountain. It depends on our own choices. It depends on our surroundings, how we are brought up, and it depends on many things. So, you know, we have free will. So we can go in any direction. And that's why influence has always been the key thing with this planet. The ability to influence. And like I say, there are powers of influence in the unseen world. There are the false gods and the true gods. And they have been at war for thousands of years and still are.
So that speaks to a lot of the upheaval that we're seeing on the planet, a lot of unexplained things that are happening out in the solar system.
Like what?
Well, we have the solar flares. We have a lot of sounds that we're hearing within the Earth. We have the changes in the weather patterns. Would some of those be attributed to these battles that are happening?
I don't think so. I think the changes bring us to a different topic, the question of Earth science and what happens when a planet begins to age. That's something else I write about, and there are some chapters about that subject in a few of my books. And in my next book, which is called Out of the Box, I write about that. I write about the Ice Age. I write about the aging of planet Earth. Solar flares, I don't go with that. So I think that we also need to go into the science side to understand some of those issues. You know, Tamara, I'm just finishing writing an article for Atlantis Rising on drought. And that's another factor in an aging planet. And I have written quite a bit against global warming because the pattern of any planetary world is to cool down and not warm up. So on the science side of things, what the planet is facing now and in the future is cooling and drying. So these are kind of separate issues, but I do think the science needs to be included.
Most definitely. We want to do a holistic approach to it all because certainly we're not separate from the planet. I think we're part of it, most definitely, intrinsically. Now, to the idea of Sitchin's work. There are, a few parallels in the myth here, but he speaks about the Anunnaki who came down and did some genetic experimenting and created this slave race there in South Africa.
Oh,
does that tie in anywhere with your work?
No. Well, yes, to the extent that many traditions speak of watchers or similar figures, and I think there's been a certain amount of confusion in this area. We have the greatest tendency to mix up men and gods. And I don't want to go into that now exactly, but let me get back to this slave race thing. I think that's nonsense. I don't know where those ideas come from, but if they come from a body of myth, I think it's just distorted myth. The only slavery that I'm familiar with is that which occurs when we die and go to heaven, and we go to the heaven connected to that which we believe. If we believe in a certain deity, we go to his heaven, and we become slaves of that deity. This is if it is false god. The false gods are very interested in enlarging and enriching the kingdoms in the other world. And so they use their influence through their minions to encourage people, mortal men, to believe certain things, and then when they die, they go to their kingdom. And that's where they are enslaved. It is a form of bondage. We are not going to be free until we free our minds and seek the truth.
That is the absolute truth. The deepest slavery is the slavery of the mind and the belief system. And I am really, really resonating with what you're speaking of, these false gods, and that when we pledge our allegiance to them by believing in them, that certainly we can become entrapped and ensnared. And that what you just stated about that, it just brings home the idea of hell, the whole idea of being in bondage to a certain entity, if you will.
Yeah, to tie in the slaves to what we were talking about a minute ago, all those great monoliths that we so admire and think that they were very gods on earth, in the Mesolithic, who created the Cyclopean monuments and monoliths, and the megalithic society going back 10, 15, 20,000 years ago. And when we write about it, when we read about it and write about it, it's in such admiring tones. But what I'm trying to say is that those were already corrupt kingdoms, and it required enslaving tens of thousands of people to build those monuments. I don't want to admire them or go travel there and be a tourist and read the brochures about how wonderful and what a mystery their culture was. I happen to be reading about Herman Melville, the 19th century author, and there was a passage that described his visit to the pyramids in Egypt, and he stood there and he got this very bad feeling. He got this very uneasy feeling about what was behind it. Or they say that extraterrestrials came and taught them how to do it. I mean, the theories are a dime a dozen, but we're ready to dig in and find out what's real and what's not.
That's right, and that's exactly why I, do this program. I think if enough people really dig in and are honest and using their intuition as well as using hard science, we can get to the bottom of it. And that's the whole idea, to wake everybody up so we can who can stop sleepwalking. And so how about maybe going a little bit into the OASP and some of the parallels that it brings forth?
Yeah. I would say this is a new Bible. It came into the world in the year 1882. It came through automatic typing. The instrument of OASP was selected. The gods and goddesses must have taken a real good look around the world. They selected a gentleman named Dr. John Balloon-Nubro. He was a medical doctor and a dentist, and he was located in New York. He was prepared 10 years in advance. He was approached by the angels. He was clairvoyant, so he could see spirits. He was approached by a phalanx of angels and asked to prepare himself. He spent a 10-year period purifying himself. My book, The Hidden Prophet, is a story of his life. Anyway, I like to get away from Nubro and get into the book itself. It was prepared. It's presented chronologically so that you can start in the beginning. Actually, there are several books. It consists of 33 books, separate books, each of them written by a separate legion of angels who were in charge during that period of time. You get a good idea how life on Earth started, how man on Earth started, what the early period was like. That information is somewhat scattered through the book, but otherwise, when the histories begin, it's about 80,000 years ago that the chronological histories begin. And it runs in cycles. Every 3,000 years, the God of Earth is changed. A God is appointed to administer the earth for a period of 3,000 years, and then a new God is appointed. You get an idea of the hierarchies in the upper regions. In any case, if we're talking about the chronological unfoldment, it runs in 3,000-year periods, so that let's take 18,000 years ago. This is only 6,000 years after the flood. The god of earth was named Apollo. And that name has lived on. That name is still remembered. I believe it's the Greeks who primarily kept that name.
Right.
After Apollo, approximately 15,000 years ago, the reign of earth was turned over to Thor, and that transmutes into Thoth in Egypt and several other names. Then Thoth was followed by Osiris, where the center of civilization was in Egypt. That was about 12,000 years ago. Then on and on. And then when you get to a certain point of history, it follows up to Moses and to Joshua, which is the name given for Jesus, Caillou, which is the name given for Confucius. All the prophets are covered. All their stories are told. It is most wonderful. The prophets Qin and Po of China, the prophet Brahma, and so on. Then in the middle of the OASP Bible, right in the middle of the book, there is what is called interlude. And it breaks away from the chronologies, which will be resumed in the later books, but it breaks away from the chronologies to present the book of cosmogony and prophecy, which is the science part, to present the Book of Safa, which covers the ceremonies, rites, and languages of the ancients. The petroglyphs and the drawings that they did. There are many illustrations bringing pictures of the past. Anyway, the chronologies follow right up to Lincoln. Wow. That was one of my inspirations for the Psychic Life of Abraham Lincoln. I learned through OASPE that Lincoln was approached by a corps of angels in his sleep, in his dreams, and asked to free the slaves. But Lincoln, being a skeptic, a bit of a skeptic, didn't quite believe it, but they came back and they gave proof of their presence and of their request. And so that turned into a wonderful story, and I was able to trace it through Lincoln's history, what actually happened. Okay, and OASPE ends with prophecy for what is going to happen, what is happening now, and what is going to happen in the next 400 years, in the next 3,000 years. And it also gives the time span for mankind and for the planet, both of which are past middle age. So I guess I could talk for a couple of hours about OASPE, but let me stop here and see if you have any questions.
You could talk for hours, and Susan, I could listen for hours. That is so very fascinating. Breaking it all down, not just a story. The Judeo-Christian Bible seems to be a story of a family. It seems like it's their particular history in a certain region.
See, myths are always given in accordance with the intelligence level of the audience.
Right, okay.
And early mankind in its early stages needed a more homey kind of soap opera to explain it all.
Right. And it seemed to be centered around animal husbandry, and propagation of crops, because that was definitely the culture then.
Oh, yes. The little people were strict vegetarians and didn't raise animals for any purpose. They were the first farmers in the world.
Now, when you think about in these OASPE, certainly it talks about cosmology, it talks about the beginning of life on the planet, and it goes into prophecy and breaks it all down. What is the purpose of us as mankind? Certainly the angel.
I'm glad you asked about purpose, because this gets back to the conflict between science and religion, and in particular between Darwinism and creationism. Creationism sees design and order and purpose in our universe and on our planet and in our race. Darwinism is pretty hardcore atheism, which sees no purpose, no design, no order. But there is a purpose, and if anybody ever wonders about purpose, the thing to look at is that we are here for a reason. We are here not so much to, we are here on the one hand to improve ourselves, but that always has to be balanced off with improving others, with uplifting others. This is part of the spiritual message of OASPE. The upliftment of others is really the work for men, particularly who have set their foot on the right road. It's not so much self-involvement like so much of the New Age is self. It is about improving yourself in every possible way, but the real oomph of it is to help others, to be a blessing to others. And this way, when we do get to the spirit world, when we drop the body, we're already resurrected instead of having to go through all kinds of hells.
Well, and that takes me to the idea. Certainly, when we drop this physical body, I often call it the 3-dimensional spacesuit that we wear, because we are beings. And it gets old, it gets tired, and it gets used up, or maybe something tragic happens. But anyway, we drop it. Do we ever come back into another body to finish up?
Never. No, that's another myth that has been fed by false gods, very interested in building up a large group of believers. But I'll tell you, I have devoted Chapter 7 of my next book to that subject, to try to show that our only direction is upward and there's no coming back.
And so what is it that people are dealing or manifesting with when they're doing past lives? When you have people showing up and children?
That's mostly their recall of past life is mostly channeling the life histories of persons who are already dead and in the spirit world, but earthbound. And they're only formed, earthbound is not a good thing to be. We have to go upward, not back. There's no turning back. But there are many spirits. Remember when I said that the continent of Pan had to be destroyed because the heavens of the earth above it were just completely dominated by earthbound spirits. Those are dark spirits.
That's what you were speaking of, earthbound spirits. So these are deceased, disembodied spirits.
Yeah, and that's the whole basis for belief in having lived before. But those are not past lives. Those are lives that people before us lived and then died and went to hell. They went to hell because they had a bad ending, or because they were completely non-spiritual in their life.
Right. And so is there any deeper connection with those that we share heredity with? Could we be channeling ancestors' experiences?
Oh, yeah, most typically it is blood relatives who come back to blood relatives.
I see. Oh, this makes a great deal of sense. So these are, in my work, I work as a spiritual therapist. And I have done what we've called past life regressions, if you will. But an idea that came to me quite a few years back, that it was actually you plugging into your ancestral history, and that you were pulling on those experiences.
You're going to have to read my next book, Out of the Box, Chapter 7, entitled Body Snatching for Karma. And that's my diatribe unleashing against all the false teaching of reincarnation. It stands in exact opposite to the spiritual teachings, particularly of Owaspe, where when we go, that's it. But we get new bodies, we get spiritual bodies in the heaven world, and we go on and on until we become gods and goddesses.
Wow, that's beautiful. I was just quoting that last night on my meditation book club that I do live on YouTube. And, the fact that we are gods and goddesses in embryo, and that here we are having these experiences so that we can be the best and most compassionate gods and goddesses. I mean, how could we be if we hadn't had any experiences?
Right.
Yeah. Well, Susan, this has been a treat for me, and I know our listeners are just completely enthralled, and we definitely want to know when that new book comes out. And please keep us posted, because it's time to wake up. There's so many false beliefs out there, so many people who are making money on these false beliefs, and not uplifting humankind.
That's right.
Yeah. So you're definitely a soldier out there in the
Thank you.
And I so appreciate your tenacity and your bravery, and I'm here to support it and to share what you're offering with the listeners.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I thank you for listening, members. I know you have a lot to share, a lot of questions for Susan, so make sure that you do connect with her. Please, Susan, share your information where people can maybe drop you a line via email or contact someone to get a hold of you.
My email is poosh8@gmail.com. And Poosh is spelled Poosh.
Excellent. All right. Are you going to be speaking anywhere soon? I know that you are local to the Georgia area.
Yeah. I'm scheduled to speak at the ARE Virginia Beach Conference on Ancient Mysteries on October 12, 2014. It's going to concentrate on forgotten worlds, strange myths, and lost legends. Their contact number is 800-333-4499.
Well, Susan, I plan on being there because...
Oh, I'd love to meet you, Tamara.
Yes, that's my birthday month, so I'm going to make a point. That'll be a gift for myself to make sure I'm there at that conference.
Oh, contact me in advance so we can get together, you know?
Oh, most definitely. All right.
Andrew Collins and John Anthony West will also be speaking that weekend.
Excellent. Yeah, they're also a couple of my favorites. I've had an interview with John Anthony West. He's just a jewel as well.
Cool.
Wonderful. All right, so until next time here on the Illuminations Media Network members section, take good care and make sure that you remember that when you are your best and you are moving to your highest elevation, that you are giving everyone else subconscious permission to do the same.
Right.
So, take care, peace, and blessings.